I have been struck down with COVID. It sucks. But it has given me a chance to give myself some time to myself and get on with catching up with my pile of shame. Time to complete my Shasvastii army, starting with this awesome mentor. To get started, the model needs an undercoat. This is what will help the rest of your paint stick to the model exactly where you need it to. But also, because acrylic paint is not completely opaque, the property of your undercoat can have an effect on the paint you apply later. For instance, black is great for covering all of the model, as there will sometimes be parts of the model that are hard to reach later. The black will help hide these hard to reach places, and you often won't have to worry about them. But black brings out all the problems with certain pigments, as it impedes coverage. This then means some colours will need lots of coats of paint to get the coverage intended. The white can help you get a good coverage, but doesn't help with giving depth to many colours. You will need to do more work to add shadow, and often with mini painting it's easier to work dark to light rather than the other way around. But black and white are not your only options. If you have a main colour to your model, it's worth undercoating with that colour. Not only does this save you time, but because your undercoat has colour, it can make your final work appear more vibrant. Remember, monochromatic colours desaturate your work, whilst other colours will help keep saturation high. My Shasvastii have a very earthy tone to their skin and armour, so I chose a dark brown as my undercoat with Citadel's Dryad bark. Then giving it 2 thin coats of paint gave the coverage I needed, even going directly onto metal. Knowing that I was probably going to be more messy with the skin tone for the model more than the armour, it made sense to start here. Using Vallejo's heavy gold brown, I gave a base coat for the face, arms and legs wherever what I considered to be his muscle was showing. I didn't need perfect coverage, but a couple of layers had the coverage smooth enough for my needs. I let this all dry for a moment and then covered the entire skin area with Citadel's Rakeland Flesh shade. This is the only time in the painting that I need to use any wash, and I tend to avoid them where I can. But for this bright base skin tone, having a wash just makes shading quick, easy and effective. I really wanted to challenge myself with a skill that I don't have: freehand. The Mentor's cape seemed the best opportunity for that, so I began with base coating the cape red with Citadel's Corn Red. I then decided on having a check pattern that would dissolve the further up the cape it went. To begin, I wanted to sketch out the pattern. I chose to use Vallejo Game Color Cold Grey. I chose a grey over a white because the coverage is better and they are easier to paint over than black. Following the folds of the cape, I traced out a grid across the bottom of the cape. Once this was complete, I filled up every other square with Citadel's Nagaroth Knight. I then went about highlighting the purple squares with Citadel's Genestealer Purple and cleaning up the squares by refilling with Corn Red where needed. Taking some Citadel Mephiston Red and mixing it with some Vallejo Glaze Medium, I worked on blending up the highlights of the cape. The Glaze Medium just helps to thin the paint you are using whilst giving you great control. Unlike mixing with water, it helps to avoid pooling and makes for smoother transitions. This was then further blended up with Vallejo Orange Red, also mixed with the Glaze Medium. As I worked on the highlights for the cape, I took the opportunity to use the glazes to blend the pattern into the rest of the cape. Because of its translucent qualities, the glaze allowed me to put down progressive layers that helped give the impression that the pattern faded as it rose higher. Just to add a bit of variety, I also added some of Citadel's Cantor Blue, but we will come back to this later. Now, on to the armour. My Shasvastii have bone-coloured armour. With the brown undercoat, the aim was to use this for all the shadows and lining, saving us time on a lot of the work needed. First, I needed to sketch the largest highlight, and to do this I used Vallejo Heavy Brown. Keeping all my brush strokes away from any recesses, I painted in all of the highlights, trying to keep my brush strokes always moving toward the lighter part of the highlight. This helps to keep some consistency of your strokes, but also the most opaque parts of any stroke are where the brush ends up. I should also add that it's very important to thin your paints and wick your brush. The second is probably even more important than the first and doesn't get said enough in painting videos. The stroke then naturally places light where you need it. This layer is then added to with a mix of the previous color with Vallejo ivory. The strokes follow the same flow but in a smaller highlight, helping to increase the fluidity of the transition. One more very fine highlight is made across the armor with pure ivory, and the armor is done. Although the skin was looking good, it was lacking some highlights. This was a quick fix to help make all those details on the skin pop. Taking the original skin tone of Vallejo Heavy Gold Brown, a quick edge highlight was added to all of the ridges and raised surfaces. This was then further added to with Citadel's Iriel Yellow to give one last edge highlight. I was now in the home stretch and could focus on the small details that would just help to enhance the model. The first was the pipes coming from the Mentor's helmet. To add a variety of color, I wanted these green. For a very quick and contrasting effect, I based the pipes in Citadel's Warg Flesh and simply highlighted with Vallejo Yellow Green. The blue on his back I wanted to highlight close to white, so I added Vallejo Blue Green to the Cantor Blue and blended it up to keep some vibrancy before eventually using the ivory that was on my wet palette to get it close to white. The gun I wanted to look ominous and alien, so an obsidian black with alien light from within was the aim. This was achieved with coloring the recesses using the purples on my wet palette and then painting my gun with Vallejo black. I gave just an edge highlight of Vallejo dark blue grey and cold grey to help it pop, and the gun was done. As I painted the base of the model, the freehand I had done was nagging at me a little. I had a transition into the red, but it didn't feel right. The overall pattern was too formulaic when suddenly disappearing. I decided I wanted the transition to red to be coming right from the base of the cape. Rather than adding more red to achieve this effect, as that might make the whole pattern just disappear, I worked on making the pattern at the base of the cape brighter by adding some ivory into the purple and giving a greater range to the transition. And with that, I called the model complete. I really love this sculpt. I remember seeing the sculpt in promotional photos and not thinking much of it, but once I got it for myself and could look at it from all angles, my opinion of it was reversed. I love how his mask with all the pipes coming from it gives him an elder god look. His pose has the Mentor overseeing forces, ultra aware of everything happening around him, yet still ready to jump into the action when needed. Now, I am going to have trouble finding excuses not to bring him into my lists. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a like and consider subscribing if you haven't already. A quick shout out to my Patreon Upturned Table. They have an awesome channel you should check out if you are into RPGs and all kinds of tabletop gaming. If you want to see the full uncut video of how I painted this miniature, you can get access to it on my Patreon channel, along with early video releases of my battle reports. I really want to put as much content out there as I can, so any support that helps me to do so is greatly appreciated. Well, I guess that about does it, so see you in the next video!